As we commence our 8th study of the Song of Songs, I would like to read to you from chapter 4 verse 1 to chapter 5 verse 1. And again I'm using the New International Version, which says, "How beautiful you are, my darling, oh how beautiful. Your eyes behind your veil are doves, your hair is like a flock of goats descending from the hills of Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of sheep just shorn, coming up from the washing. Each has its twin, not one of them is alone. Your lips are like a scarlet ribbon, your mouth is lovely. Your temples behind your veil are like the halves of a pomegranate. Your neck is like the Tower of David, built with courses of stone. On it hang 1,000 shields, all of them shields of warriors. Your breasts are like 2 fawns, like twin fawns of a gazelle that browse among the lilies. Until the day breaks and the shadows flee, I will go to the mountain of myrrh and to the hill of incense. You are altogether beautiful, my darling. There is no flaw in you. Come with me from Lebanon, my bride. Come with me from Lebanon. Descend from the crest of Amana, from the top of Sania, the summit of Hermon, from the lion's den and the mountain haunts of leopards. You have stolen my heart, my sister, my bride. You've stolen my heart with one glance of your eyes, with one jewel of your necklace. How delightful is your love, my sister, my bride. How much more pleasing is your love than wine, and the fragrance of your perfume more than any spice. Your lips drop sweetness as the honeycomb, my bride. Milk and honey are under your tongue. The fragrance of your garments is like the fragrance of Lebanon. You are a garden locked up, my sister, my bride. You are a spring enclosed, a sealed fountain. Your plants are an orchard of pomegranates with choice fruits, with henna and nard and saffron, calamus and cinnamon, with every kind of incense tree, with myrrh and aloes, and all the finest spices. You are a garden fountain, a well of flowing water streaming down from Lebanon. Awake, north wind, and come, south wind, blow on my garden, that its fragrance may spread everywhere. Let my beloved come into his garden and taste its choice fruits. I have come into my garden, my sister, my bride. I've gathered my myrrh with my spice. I've eaten my honeycomb and my honey. I've drunk my wine and my milk. Eat, friends, and drink. Drink your fill of love. When I started at senior school, I was in an all-male environment. As puberty approached, we boys became increasingly aware of our sexuality, and I remember that a number of books circulated around the class, discreetly hidden at the bottom of our desks, often covered in brown paper. These books were and remain the so-called classics among the books dealing with sex. I do not recall much of what I read, but I do remember 2 things. One of the books described a number of different positions that could be attempted in the act of sex, some of which appeared such as would likely defy the attempts of any but the most supple of Olympic gymnasts. Another book went into considerable detail in describing the various shapes of different female genitalia and the expectations that the partner might have of the differing levels of pleasure that he might obtain from each. Both books owed their origin to the Middle East. This, of course, is true of the Song of Songs. It both comes from the Middle East and also deals with the same subject matter. Indeed, none but the most unimaginative reader could fail to recognize that this section of the song ends in chapter 5 verse 1 with the act of sex. But there, all the similarities end. While the song becomes increasingly erotic in this passage, it never oversteps the mark and becomes pornographic like the other books. And while it describes the union of the young couple, it does not simply do so as depicting the sating of sexual lust, but to describe the occasion of one in which mutual commitment has found its ultimate fulfillment. Now some of the language sounds strange to our ears, and the groom's words are not the ones we would adopt to commend a bride. If a groom in many places today used the language here to describe his bride, he might get a slap for his labours, and justifiably so. But the language of love is of course determined by our own culture. Nevertheless, we do not find it difficult to understand what is taking place or what is being said here. Up to this point, the young man has been relatively reticent to speak. The story has been told largely in the words of the bride. We suggested that early in the relationship he was somewhat tongue-tied and gauche. Later, as his confidence grew, when he spoke, he did so in words that are some of the most exalted in the world's literature. And here he is given virtually an entire chapter to himself. And he does not disappoint us, or one suspects, more to the point, his wife. It is possible that the chapter commences with the young couple still at the wedding feast. Some of the language would not be inappropriate as the groom's wedding speech. However, his words in verses 1 to 7 quickly come to the point where this is not the case, and it seems best to assume the setting is the bridal chamber. There the bride is undressing, or perhaps being undressed by him. So naturally the groom begins by celebrating the surpassing beauty of all that he has seen so far of his wife. Just the sight of her eyes behind her veil and the hint of her tresses are such as to send him into raptures. Then, as the veil is removed, her forehead, teeth and lips captivate his gaze. Finally, as her clothes are shed, he sees the jewellery that a bride often wore around her neck under her clothing, and then, for the first time, breasts the like of which he cannot imagine there to be any equal on earth. So aware that all she is now his, he looks to the moment when in a matter of seconds he will happily and delightedly make his home among the breasts until dawn breaks. However, aroused as he undoubtedly is, he does not forget to commend her as a person. It is this beautiful young woman, preserved intact for him like a sacrificial animal in the temple, that concentrates his praise. He desires her with every fibre of his being, but it is indeed her, not simply her sexual organs, for which he longs. In the latter part of the chapter, urgently and lyrically, but with a tenderness and an invitation to share all she is with him, he woos her into their bed. As verses 9 and 10 reveal, he is already delighted in her love, and it has proved to him far greater than any other stimulant. He's over the moon that she's a virgin, as we can see in verse 12. Every touch of her lips, the very perfume that she has worn, has bewitched him. Gently then, he invites her to join him, aware, as perhaps verse 15 hints, that the garden that has hitherto been locked to visitors is opening to him and him alone, and is showing signs of arousal similar to the one that drives him forward toward union. At this point in verse 16, the bride speaks for the first time in this chapter. The moment has now arrived, and briefly she invites him to enter her garden. Words are now at a premium, and deeply satisfied, he acknowledges her invitation with his willing response. A veil is drawn across their first sexual encounter. Technique is irrelevant, maximum pleasure not the aim. The first night, so often a fumbling failure when viewed by such criteria, is of no consequence. Union cannot be measured by merely physical pleasure, or success measured by technical criteria. Whatever their initial experience, they've sealed their love in their union, and after all, practice may make perfect, or nearly so. At this point, we're introduced to another voice. Is it the chorus of friends who've not had much to do for several songs, or is this another solo voice? And is it a veiled reference to the voice of God? If the latter is the case, and it certainly cannot be excluded, it is an affirmation of the path upon which these newlyweds have so far come. It's a ringing endorsement of their enjoyment of sexual union, and forms an encouragement, a divine encouragement to them, to continue to enjoy one another in their future journey together, both body and soul. One supposes that most grooms on their wedding night do not break out into the sort of exalted poetry of this young man. We might equally suppose that the bride might reply to such comments with the words, "Shut up and get on with it." But to be over-pedantic misses the point. Whether in words or gestures or simply in the unfolding of the wedding night, the attitudes that these two young people display are meant to be exemplary. And if the language is overbaked, it's intended to convey something that is sacred which is taking place, something to be approached with awe and wonder, gentleness and utter delight, something under the benediction of God himself. What a difference from those books I read at school, and frankly how much better, infinitely so.